It's the same old story, it's another tale. So once again, the roof supports were removed, the walls were pulled down, but this time it was set fire to. And everything in the place suggests that it seems that there was some kind of Tarantino fracas in there of some sort, because there was a lot of broken pottery around the place before the roof was brought down. But all of it was left exactly where it was, apart from the seals. Somebody went in there, they had the seals out, they ground them and they carried on using them. So what you have there is the first sign of authority. That's a symbol of authority, and it was worth somebody going into what was otherwise probably a pretty sacred site. They left everything else untouched apart from these seals. So you had somebody going in there, and what they're pulling out is authority. What they're pulling out is the right for whoever it was that was in there before, and they're carrying it forward. And that makes it an important place. That's the kind of thing that made the Halab period the massive trading period it was. People were starting to be able to keep track of what they bought and what they'd sold. And for a long time they had these kind of little tokens and things. But at this point they were starting to write seals. It's a major change. And it's only 6,000–7,000 years ago. Yes. So that's Arpachaya. And the reason I've looked at that is because there isn't anywhere else like it. There isn't anywhere else with such an amazing concentration of pottery, stone jugs, all that kind of stuff. But really, it comes from an era when farming was forming up in the north. What we're really interested in, though, is what's happening down in the south. So there's Tel Halaf and Arpachaya. What we're now going to do is we're moving a little bit forward in time. We're moving to a period that's between 5,000 and 6,000 BC. It's still a reasonable long time ago, but compared with how far back we started, it's no time at all. And what we're dealing with now is a pottery called the Ubaid pottery, and that was literally being traded over this entire area, right the way through Egypt and everything. It was in Egypt, it was in Turkey, and it all named after this place. And Eridu is one of the places we're interested in here. It was founded 5,400 BC as a city. It's 500 metres north to south and 300 metres east to west, so it's reasonable size compared with the other places we've seen today. Remember I said they're kind of 1.7 hectares? This is a big site. It's now immediately west of the Eridu exit on the Baghdad to Basra motorway, and it's surrounded by tall concrete pillars with razor wire on them. They don't want you in there at all. This is it here. And it's another tell, so it's another habitation mound, and excavations of cemeteries here. There's another picture of it. Excavation of a cemetery at Eridu revealed 200 graves of individuals buried in brick-lined pits, often with pots and jewellery. Figurines with lizard-like heads were found in these graves and other sites of the period, and are widely assumed to have had a religious significance. Well, you can ignore that, because that's what they assume about everything. But this is a massive change. We have suddenly gone from Chatal Hayek type and the kind of mound up at Arpachaya and stuff, to somebody building brick-lined pits and putting grave offerings in them, and we've gone from having the nice fat curvy ladies to this extremely skinny type lady, and we also have the first ever male figurines. Until that point the most common figurines were all female, and this was a real sudden change. We don't know why this happened. Eridu was the home of one of the ancient gods. It was called Ea. The local version of the god was called Ea, but it became the home of Enki, who was one of the Sumerian gods and was associated with the Anunnaki. And the other thing about this place was that far from not having any temples, the temples came first. The same is true of all these cities we're going to look at now, is what turns up first is a temple. And then the city, then more temples around that temple, and then the city develops around the temples. So, if you remember the old places we were looking at, they had no signs of administrative centres, no signs of any of that kind of stuff. Well, here, the administrative centre's being built first. This is just like that, right out of the blue.
You know Enki, was he something to do with health? Is that what
he was the god of the waters, yes. There was this big scrap between Enki and Enlil. And that is basically, I think, when they started setting up the Tory Labour thing. It's when this sort of, you've got good God, bad God, good cop, bad cop. same stuff. And this is where it started. It actually bloody started in Eridu. I'm not joking. That's the first place they put it. And this was what the temple looked like to start with. And you can see that they were onto a good thing. Because as we come up through the levels, you end up with bigger and bigger places. Also, what's happening now is we're starting to see a lot more weapons. They tend to be stored in the temple. In the places here, there's some what's called feminist archaeology going on in Iraq and some of these other places, and that's not really a very fair description of it. What it is archaeologists who are going in there and they're saying we're not interested in the kings and the queens and all the great stuff that was going on there. What we want to know is what was going on in the houses. What were the people doing? What were the women doing? That's what we want to know. And when they look into the houses of these ancient places, they find in the lower levels that the people were doing the stuff that people do at home. They were doing basket making and obsidian crafting and bead making and all the stuff we talked about. But once we start seeing the temples, once we start seeing the temple cities, you start seeing the raw materials for those activities being handed out by the temple to the people. The people make the stuff and give the stuff back to the temple, and the temple then feeds the people. And at the time that all of this is happening, you see the ability to make food in the domestic homes move. It moves into the temples. It can no longer cook at home. You see all the domestic observances disappearing from the home hearth. So all these little household gods and little household shrines, they disappear. If any of you come and listen to my talk on the Maya and the peoples of Mesoamerica, you'll see that happening again and again there as well. As civilizations and temples and elites arise, you lose the ability to cook at home, and you especially lose the ability to do your domestic observances. So there's a degree of control being established here. And like we say, Ea, Enki, is the oldest of the gods of Earth. Yes. It is said now that priests and administrators have begun overseeing many aspects of daily life, including land and labour management, distribution of food, and above all, correct procedures for religious rites and rituals. Without such temples, there would have been no early development of complex society on the Mesopotamian plain. So we've got what we've got now because we've got temples. The historians making a clear connection between the world we find ourselves in and the establishment of these ancient places.
Did these places have astrological importance as well? Were they just plants anywhere, or were they like astrology?
They had ziggurats and they knew a lot about the stars, but it's difficult for us at the moment to tell how much they knew about the stars. The main source of information on what the Sumerians, which are the ancient Iraqis, knew about the solar system, unfortunately comes from a character called Zachariah Sitchin. And whilst there is lots and lots of really, really important data in his books, it's recently been discovered that he's been lying to us about how much he knows about the languages that he's talking about. So he's been known to print an article from the Hebrew upside down and not spot it. And he's been given a good going over by people who honestly, genuinely do understand what they're talking about, and Mr. Sitchin has not even come out and gone one round with them. So he's been writing for 30 years and he's not willing to defend the stuff that he's been publishing, which is a great shame because there was something going on here, and now we're just as confused as we ever were about it. But they, in my opinion, I suspect we would find they had quite advanced, we will find that they had quite advanced astronomical knowledge. These guys walked into Sumer, as we'll hear, and they just created civilization in 600 years. So some weird shit was coming down, even if it wasn't what Sitchin was describing.
Can they have something of a ley line on which to build their sites?
I'm not sure how they sighted them. Mostly I believe they sighted them close to water. And the reason I say that is because mostly some of these places were lived in for 4,000 or 5,000 years, and then suddenly the river just disappears 15 miles to the east and the town has to be abandoned. So I would imagine they were pretty much forced to put... But see, once again, we're going to hear, and this is a bit of a cut to the end really, because we're going to hear how they did all this stuff. There's no timber here, there's no stone here, and there are no metal ores. And the place where they chose to set these places up in the south of Iraq, everything we're about to hear about was done through trade. So your question as to why they put those cities where they put them is probably one of the most important questions we can ask. And as far as I can see, it's a question that nobody's bothering to try to answer.
Apart from they have good transport
yet, and also, as we're going to find out, there may well have been really, really ancient places here before. So these guys, they've got temples as centres of community focus, they've got the use of seals in economic administration, they've got extensive sharing of cultural and architectural attributes. So they're really talking to each other and moving around. They've got exchange of goods over long distances. That means that we've effectively got the grounds of what we would call civilization already there, sort of 5000 BC. And we can see that from then on it really takes off. Eridu stayed as a fairly kind of lowly, small place. The place that really grew was called Ur of the Chaldees, home of Abraham. Straight away, we see a completely different scale of town. This one is 35 metres high. This is a massive pile of mud. And for ages it was called the Mound of Pitch. It was known that ancient people had lived there for a long, long time, but it wasn't until the 1920s that somebody came and took a spade to it. You can see the remains of the kind of buttresses that ran up the side of it. We're going to see a reconstructed version of it shortly. There's also a way up here. This is the main causeway up to the top. And on top there would have been a citadel, effectively a temple citadel, and gardens and all of that kind of stuff, shrines, and a whole load of very, very interesting religious artefacts made out of gold and all slightly bigger than would be usable by a human and all of that. These temples and ziggurat mounds are a study in themselves. But in front and behind of this one you can see all the remains of the ancient town that surrounded the ziggurat. Now that's how they built it. Just like at Eridu, they kicked off with a temple and then they established a town around it. But by now, these would have had canals coming off the river, they'd have had magazines and gold and silver workers and stone workers and people working in jewels. All of this completely surrounding the place. Really huge. That's the ziggurat at Ur reconstructed. Now that is a pretty impressive building for people to be coming up sort of 3,000 or 4,000 BC. This is what it looks like from the side. These holes in it were to allow water to drain from the gardens on the top. You can see that it's made out of bricks, quite finely made bricks. The Sumerians invented mud-baked bricks with straw in them. They didn't use them for their common houses, as we've seen. They did the adobe collapsing thing for that, but they did make bricks for religious structures. That's mostly what they used them for. As we've seen at Göbekli Tepe, there were little bricks. Do you remember? There were little caves between the stones. One of the reasons why I highlighted that as we came through is because they are much old. These were previously thought to be the oldest baked bricks, but we now know that at Göbekli Tepe, although they weren't putting straw in them, they were still baking them. Yes. This is a view of Ur as Woody's team discovered it as they came in. I just really loved it. This looks like something out of Indiana Jones. Funnily enough, since I discovered this picture and started using it as Woody's team coming into the ziggurat at Ur, I found it on the internet as a picture of the ziggurat at Nineveh as well, which is another Sumerian site. So I don't know which of the two it is, actually. But you can see that there's these huge, this was just a mound, and as they kind of dig into it, they find all these amazing structures. You think that on that kind, sometimes archaeology must be really boring, but if you're working on a project like this, it must be astonishing, because as they worked into there, as they worked into Ur, they found working ovens and things like that. They found libraries of baked clay cuneiform tablets, thousands and thousands and thousands of tablets, so many of them that we're still translating them. And of course, at the moment, if you look at the British Museum, you'd think that they were all recipes for bread and, list of servants I bought off you and all these. It's all domestic stuff. But I'm sure that there's a lot more stuff. They were masters of lists. They wrote down lists of stars and lists of this and this and that. So when we worked through all of those cuneiform tablets and understood them, and when they told us about all the ones they've got, we'll probably know a lot more about this particular civilization than we could ever find out about the other ones that weren't writing it. We're literally walking into history here as things get written down. About this time, it became a notable central population. It got really big. By 3200 BC, they reckon there were 65,000 people living in Ur. 65,000 people, that's a pretty major population. And about that time, 3200 BC, was when people were basically putting the finishing touches to Stonehenge. So we were doing stonework here.